Hey, Girl Scouts. Listen, my name is Michelle. Welcome to Montgomery, Alabama. I'm going to be your host and your guide through this history tour, this trek, if you will, of civil rights history. We're going to focus on some women that many people have not really heard about when we're talking about the civil rights movement. So, you cannot come to Montgomery, Alabama without first starting down here at the Montgomery riverfront, the Alabama riverfront. And behind me, I got some ladies, some girls. Listen, they're gonna travel with us through this trek. So, y'all ready?
Yes!
I said, are you ready?
Yes!
We're getting ready to go. Y'all can take a little trek of your own, but I'm gonna tell you, it's very important for us to start here. Now, let me ask you this. Did you know that at one point in time, Montgomery, Alabama had nearly 38 tribes? Did you know that?
I didn't.
You didn't know, right? So, okay, here's a little trivia. Come on in a little closer, let me tell you. Here's a little trivia. Name the tribe that Alabama gets her name.
Oh, I got you. Choctaw.
Nah,
Cherokee.
nah,
Chickasaw?
Alabama.
Alabama.
Go on, girl, go, go. They were called the Alabamas. They were called the Alabama, nicknamed the Alabamas, and so Alabama gets her name from the indigenous tribe. So how can you come here? You just can't start talking about Civil War, can't talk about civil rights. You gotta first talk about the indigenous people and how their land was stolen, how there was a fight, the War of 1812, the Red Sticks, the Creeks. Listen, it's all right here. Look at your screen and you'll see where the land not only was stolen, but it was genocide that transpired here. And from here, what is called the Old Federal Road all the way up to Adams Avenue, pushed over to the west, Oklahoma. So with that being said, you got to make way for enslaved African people to come to this city or to this state. By 1819, cotton was king and Alabama became a statehood. So with that, the importation of enslaved African people, y'all need to see it? Girls, we need to go see it. Y'all ready? Let's go. Oh, so you guys beat me to it. So let me just tell you a little bit about this marker. This is the domestic slave trade. So in the 17th century, millions of African people were kidnapped, bought, sold into slavery. Montgomery, Alabama was one of the top slave trading hubs in the Union. They were brought right here. They came by rail, by boat, that old federal road that we just talked about that was stolen from the indigenous people, but also it made a pathway in to bring Africans, men, women, and children into the city. They walked here. They were brought in by boats, by rails. And with that being said, it's just important for us to talk about this history before we could talk about anything else, before Civil War and civil rights. So I want to ask you a question. Can y'all give us a minute? Do you mind? Thank you. Let me ask you a question. When you talk about the domestic slave trade, these people were brought here, Mississippi, New Orleans, from southern slave states, bought and sold into slavery from southern states. So did they teach you this history in school?
Very briefly.
What did they say? What's the narrative that was created?
They said that enslaved people were powerless and forever at mercy to enslavers. And in the museum I went to yesterday, they called enslaved people poor families.
Poor families. And in some groups or in some books, they're labeled as immigrants, right? So it's important for us to have this conversation as we talk about the men, women, and children that were raped and mutilated and discarded. And literally in the center of our town, they were sold off along with cattle. So markers like this is very important. And I want to just show you all some more things down by the river before we get to see some of the heroic women that literally paved the way for the civil rights movement. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade God's gonna trouble the water.
I wanted to bring you here to our riverfront. This is the Alabama River. There are three rivers that comprise of this one river. It's the Coosa and the Tallapoosa. They all intertwine to make it the Alabama River. There were three docks. You have Mobile, Selma, Montgomery. So coming up this pathway here, the steamboats. This is a replica of the Harriet 1. This is the Harriet 2, the Harriot. I'll tell you all a little bit about that later. This is the Harriet 2. Today it's used as our entertainment cruise ship, but before that, back in the early 1800s, it was used to transport enslaved African people in through this port. See this bowl of cotton here? So historically, of course, cotton was not only king, but this was the main commodity at the time that was driving the commerce for Montgomery, Alabama, along with the importation of slaves. Initially, there's little pricks here. Those pricks should be pricking your fingers. So people ask me all the time, well, Michelle, what do you think that people are gonna think or say after they take your tour? I don't care. What I want you to do is I want you to open up your eyes so that you can see. That's why we have the red glasses. See this history through a different perspective. Open up your heart, take off the blinders and put on the red glasses so that you can see what we're trying to say to you, so that you can hear. And after you hear, after you see, then you can make the positive changes that you need to change in terms of social justice and taking this conversation where it should go. Let's do a little yoga. Ain't nobody down here. Y'all want to do some yoga? Let's do some yoga. And I want you to stand in the position. I want you to stretch up. And then we're going to go all the way down. We're going to stretch that back. But as you're stretching that back, I also want you to just stay there. Stay in this position. I want you to pretend that it's 90-degree weather, or that it's raining, or that's extremely cold. And if you can imagine from sun up to sundown, my dad says from can to can't, right? Now I want you to take 3 steps forward, back bent on a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Can you imagine doing that all day? You may have your baby on your back, or maybe you don't have any soles in your shoes. Can you imagine being bent over all day? After you pick that cotton, I want you to take the seeds out. This is before the Eli Whitney, before the cotton gin. You have to take the seeds out of the bowl of cotton. And after you do that, I want you to bale it, weigh it. You bring it down here to what we call the cotton slide. And they would roll those big bales of cotton down to the steamboats, like what you have here. Come on over here, I want you to see this too. Right here, this is a timeline that talks about Montgomery's history. Just want you to kind of scroll through here. And just if you will, at one glance, is there anything missing that you can see? Anything missing? We have right here, they're talking about the indigenous, of course, DeSoto, talking about Dexter and Scott, John Scott. This is John Scott. I'm sorry, this is Andrew Dexter. And this is John Scott. Andrew Dexter was an attorney from Massachusetts. John Scott was a planter from Georgia, owned plenty of slaves. Right here. Streets named after them and everything. City built on commerce. What's missing is the commerce. Those enslaved African people, some 435,000 towards the end of the Civil War. There's no indication of it, except for when you get to a city built on commerce. We'll put the graphic up so you can see it. It gets down to the Harriet arrived and transformed Montgomery into an important regional hub for the shipping, trading, and storing of cotton and many other important commodities. There's no mention of the people that built this city. That's why I wanted to bring you down here, because some of those people, those women, they also made the bricks, they built the buildings, they were part of construction crews. And not only that, they aided in terms, well, you know what, it's not even aided, they were forced into experimentation. James Marion Sims. This is a tour where I need your eyes to be open and for your heart to be enlightened. So now that you've learned a little bit of history, how Montgomery was founded, the route into the city, this is where those men, women, and children came. They walked to many of their deaths, many of them to the auction block. But there's a tunnel that I want you to somewhat feel the presence. There was a man by the name of John Newton who wrote a song about the amazing grace. Now, his grace was because he was a slave owner or slave trader. He worked on the slave ships, and his eyes were enlightened. They were open. So next, coming up, you're going to hear Toya Jones, season 14 of The Voice, sing Amazing Grace. But in that, I want you to close your eyes as she sings it and just be open to having your eyes opened so that you can learn a little bit more of this history.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
So, did you learn anything?
Yes.
Can you see a little more clearly?
Yes.
Let's go to the next spot. You ready?
Let's go.
Let's go. So we're getting ready to make a turn. A lot of our streets are named after past presidents, Confederate soldiers. This street here is Coosa Street at the corner of Market and Monroe. But this was also the colored entrance to all of the buildings or all of the businesses that led to the inside of shops, the Montgomery Fair, the Crest. This was the colored entrance. It was mandated by law, by Jim Crow laws, to have 2 separate entrances, sometimes 3. And so this is the colored entrance, but it's on a very famous street. It's really the historic Black business district, but there's no sign of that here except for one little piece of history that the owners decided to preserve. And I want to take you all inside so you can see. Let's go.
The face in the stones is a mirror looking into you. For beneath you streams have flowed and rivers of earth have moved beneath your feet, but you have never witnessed the immovability of stones quite like these. You see, the weight of our sorrows was growing so enormous, our spirits were weak. Strong winds of resistance kept blowing, and to this journey, the outcome seemed bleak. And yet, we traveled on. Dr. King felt the brush of an angel's wing, cried out, "Let freedom ring!" And the stones, well, they cried out too. For darkly we gazed into the days ahead, and we looked to see the might of her granite wonders there, beneath the touch of time's unerring hand, like priceless treasures sinking in the sand. The way they hold you, give you a way forward and a doorway in, staunches your need to leave, and then becomes faithful by going nowhere. And just like you too, who have come from so far to be touched by everything you found, But until we reach a common ground and become unbound, because the well is running dry, racial tensions are running high, under 21, far too young to die. No, it ain't fair. It's hard when you're looking for love and it ain't there. Hard when you're looking for peace and it ain't there. Hard when you're looking for joy and it ain't there. But how long will it be till a voice of liberty can cry out so free and ask, what can you do for your country? Not what can your country do for you? How long will it be till a voice of liberty can cry out so free and say that truth crushed to the earth will one day rise again? How long will it be till a voice of liberty can cry out so free and say, I have a dream? How long will it be till a voice of liberty can cry out so free without the stones having to cry out too? So I gotta keep moving, Lord, moving, Lord. We've come a long way from where we've been, but we got to keep moving till we move on in. Ooh,
One male house slave, 52 years old, sound of wind and free from blemishes. What am I offered, gentlemen? What am I offered? Make a bid. We'll make it hot.
So now we're here at the fountain. They call it One Court Square. Historically, it's known as the slave auction. This is the marketplace where men, women, and children were brought up from the riverfront, held at one of those depots along the way, and then brought here to be bought, sold, and traded. So basically, this is where the footsteps of those men, women, and children were brought here. If you were to start from 1619, it goes all the way around, all the way to 2020, where we are today, still flat on our backs, dealing with the injustices and the inhumane practices of killing black people without a cause. But right here are the footsteps of where to honor those men, women, and children that were bought, sold, and traded. This is Hebe. She's the cupbearer to the gods. She's also the fountain of youth. But today she's a distraction from what this real history is all about in downtown Montgomery, Alabama. The women, along with the men, mainly women, helped build the buildings. They crafted the bricks. But right here, this is a sacred place for us because this is where our ancestors constantly speak to us on a day-to-day basis as to the inhumane injustices that have transpired right here. I wanted to also bring someone that's kind of hidden in the shadow. There's a narrative out there that talks about the women of the civil rights movement, but oftentimes they miss a couple of the key players. And one of them just so happens to be the mother of Butler Browder. Her name was Aurelia Browder. And Butler, thank you for coming. And can you just share with us about your mother, what she meant to the movement? Because she's hidden, but your mother's name is actually engrafted in stone on the corner here. So let's just talk a little bit about Browder versus Gale and your mom and her role in the civil rights movement.
My mother was a lead plaintiff in the case Browder v. Gale. And that case is why Montgomery is the birthplace of the modern civil rights movement. It changed our culture from a legal standpoint of being controlled by Plessy v. Ferguson as opposed to Browder v. Gale. Browder v. Gale guaranteed us our rights under the Constitution, under the 14th Amendment. Plessy violated that. It took those rights away. And that's the premise that we live under today, Plessy v. Ferguson, equal rights and protection of the law for everybody. My mother was a lead plaintiff because she was arrested on the bus prior to the noted Rosa Parks, as were many other people. Rosa Parks was not the first to be arrested or to refuse to give up her seat, but really the last. There were many people before, even before my mother. The first incident that I know about was in 1948 with my mother, but the one that's most noted in history occurred in 1955, months before the arrest of Rosa Parks. My mother was born in 1919, and as we know, the Great Depression occurred in 1929. Well, shortly thereafter, my mother and her other siblings were taken to Birmingham to work in the white people's homes, who were factory workers mostly, and to do whatever trades they could do to make a living. The boys stayed home with their father, and the girls went with their mother. From that point forward, my mother came back to Montgomery in the late 30s, early 40s. She bought 2 houses on South Hall Street. One she lived in, and she rented the other to her sister. Then when she met my father in the mid-40s, she moved to Highland Avenue, and she rented the other house that she was in, to her brother. Finally, she sold the both of them. She also owned property on Pier Hill Road. She sought to build a hotel on that piece of property in 1960. She submitted a building permit to the city of Montgomery. This was the property that she was raised on. They told her that the water table was too high, so she sold the property. That property now houses the industrial park at the intersection of Pier Hill Road and Interstate 85. Her first arrest in 1948 by the bus driver she resorted to never having that problem again. That's what caused her to buy cars and to put them on taxi stands. She never traded in a car. Once she bought it and used it for a while, she converted it to a taxi. She developed a long-time relationship with Brubaker Motors. There was a man named Mr. Cooper. Never will forget him. Whenever he got a nice car in, he'd call her. We're going to send it out to your house, and you try it out. If you like it, keep it. If you don't, send it back. I didn't know many black people that had that kind of clout in business. She also believed that you deal with the same people all the time, so you develop a rapport with that business. She did all her banking with First National Bank, right here, right over there. And all of her car transactions from the time she met Mr. Cooper were with Brubaker Motors. So don't let the ills of life end your life. Make it better of them. I think that's what she said.
Okay, so now we have made it to our next destination. We just left Butler Browder. We talked about Aurelia Browder and the Browder v. Gale case, and how these women are essentially not talked about as much as they should be, because they are the forerunners, really, the Joanne Robinson, right? And so you have started this beautiful art project I don't like to call it an art project. I like to call it a memorial, or just to call the name of Claudette Colvin through art. Tell us about where we are. We're on Claudette Colvin Drive. Yes. Tell us about it, Cassandra, and thank you for joining us on this conversation.
Thank you for having me. So yes, we're here on Claudette Colvin Drive, here the home of Claudette Colvin. When on March 2nd, 1955, she was arrested at the age of 15 years old. Mm-hmm. She was arrested. I cannot stress that enough. 15 but she was old. Arrested, yes, and went to jail because she did not give up her seat for a white person. Right. So from that, I learned about Claudette back in 2016. And actually, Claudette's house is a few steps or a few yards from this mural. Mm-hmm. And so from there, from 2016, I was just like, wow, she's from King here. That's very important. A lot of people do not know about her. So the conversations began then. So from there in 2017, the city granted her March 2nd Claudette Colvin Day, and from then we tried to have something every year in honor of her.
Yes.
So last year, one of the projects we were wanting to do, because again, a lot of people don't know about Claudette or Aurelia or any of the ladies versus the Browder versus Gale case.
Right.
So a way to honor her and a way to kind of beautify the neighborhood and the area and educated people, we wanted to just put this artwork up. We partnered with King Canvas, and we got some local artists here from the neighborhood, and we put this beautiful piece together, and we get a lot of compliments with it. So very proud of it, very happy about it. Like I said, I get a lot of feedback, and it's so great because again, we're trying to educate people and let them know about this piece of history that is essentially getting lost.
Yeah,
or left
and
behind.
you know what's sad to me is that, you know, I don't knock Dr. King. I think what they did was great, but these women were the backbone.
Yes.
You gotta acknowledge the fact that they were and she was a girl. She was just
a girl. She was 15 years
just
old,
15.
a teenager.
I got a chance to meet her one time. Can I tell my little Claudette? Can I tell my Claudette Colvin story? Yes, ma'am. Okay, so this is what happened. So there was the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. They had their big opening,
Right.
and she was here.
Yes.
Claudette Colvin was here, and everyone wanted a photo with her, but nobody offered the lady a cup of water. Like, you know, it was a long day, and she's like, you know, my sugar's low, and but she, so my students that were with me, they wanted a photo with her, but they heard the call that no one was attending to her needs, and so they brought her a cup of water. But I just love how she talked to my students, and she said, I knew that at the age of 15 that I was going to make a difference. She knew it. Like, you know, she's in her classrooms. Back then in the classrooms, Black teachers really paid attention to their students. They gave them the knowledge.
Yes.
And so she said, I knew that what was happening during Jim Crow, segregation, these laws that were prohibiting Black people to live freely, just to sit where you want to sit.
Right.
She knew that at the age of 15 that she was going to make a difference. But unfortunately, her name has kind of been silenced or muffled a little bit. So what you're doing here and the beautiful colors and just bringing it to life is very important.
Yes.
So what would you say to young girls at that age, what they can do, even in something as simple as, you know, we have these beautiful ladies here, but it's like, what can you do at your age to make a difference?
Right. And on the wall, if you notice, we have this beautiful saying that's so important. You are never too young or old to make a difference. So let the young girls that you can do anything that your mind sets to.
Right.
So it's about helping them develop their mindset into believing you really can. And Claudette Colvin's story is really that you really can make a difference in the world.
Right, right. Absolutely. Well, I thank you for what
Thank
you're doing
you.
out
Yes,
here.
thank you.
And you have the young and the old.
Yes.
Let's not say old, seasoned.
Season, yes, absolutely.
Because, you know, ladies, we don't like to be, so we call it seasoned. But thank you for
Yes.
this. Before there was
Yes.
Rosa, there was who?
Thank you.
Thank you. So if you all like the Claudette Colvin art, the mural, look in your bag. There's a surprise for you. So we're here at our last stop. We've talked a little bit about Aurelia Browder. We've talked a little bit about Claudette Colvin. We've explored the indigenous people of Alabama, and we've also been down to the riverfront. Well, here at the Southern Poverty Law Center, there are names that are engraved on this granite here that talks about the effects of Jim Crow, Black codes, what I call slavery by another name. We would not have these places without the fight for justice and equality in the United States, in Montgomery, Alabama, that ripple effect throughout the country. So each one of these girls are standing at a marker that talks about the people that actually lost their lives. Southern Poverty Law Center is a group of attorneys and an organization that fights for civil rights and equal justice, if you will. So to my right, this young lady is gonna read off the name of a woman who lost her life. Her children lost their mother. A husband lost a wife. What's her name?
Viola Gregg Louisa,
Read the rest.
killed by Klan while transporting marchers, Selma Highway, Alabama, March 25th, 1965.
March 25th, 1965. Viola lived a beautiful life in Detroit, heard the call of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1965 to come to the South to march for freedom's rights of vote for the Voting Rights Act. She got here, she worked vigorously to help register people to vote. And then that day when, it came time for them to march over the Selma Bridge, to march from Selma to Montgomery, that third march, in order to raise or amplify the voices for voting rights, simply for the right to vote. She made it all the way to the state's capital that day, March 25th, 1965. And as she transported people back to Selma, Alabama, someone shot her in the head. There were 2 other people in the car with her, but she was the one who died. So it's important for us to share this story, but for the most part, she was a woman, a wife, and a mother. She was a girl first. But with that, we're gonna walk around and just see some other names of people that have lost their lives. Come on. September 15th, 1963, Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carol Robinson, Sidney Wesley, schoolgirls killed in the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. There were 5 girls that were actually suffered. One lost her eye. They say there was only 4 girls, but really there were 5. December 5th, 1955, Montgomery bus boycott. So it had been 10 years since the Montgomery bus boycott to the death of Viola Craig Liuzzo. 10 years. 1955, 1965. And here we're standing by May 17th, 1954. Supreme Court outlaws school segregation, Brown v. Board of Education. And what was her name?
Miss Ruby Bridges.
What's her name?
Miss Ruby Bridges.
Ruby Bridges took a stand. Her mama sent her to school anyhow. So the world needs women and girls. I want to thank you all for taking our tour. What do you all think?
It was great.
It's great?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question. What is your charge to keep? In the Baptist churches, back in the old black churches, they would say, there's a God to glorify. You got a charge to keep and a God to glorify, right? So what is your charge to keep? What's your mission? What do you plan on doing, even though you're not too old to do it, too young to do it? What do you plan to do?
My charge to keep is speaking up on what I believe in.
All right. Thank you. So with that, when you think about the indigenous people of Alabama, the Civil War, the beginning of the Civil War, it was really about the enslavement of African people, men, women, and children. When you think about the evolution of slavery by another name, which causes us to have a civil rights movement, even in today's time, from Dr. King to Ruby Bridges, to Claudette Colvin, to Joanne Robinson, we are still fighting on, to your Tamika Mallory's, your Tasha Browns of the world, your Nina Simone's. The movement and the march continues. So with that, what is your charge to keep? We talk about black codes. After the Civil War, once the Civil War ended, we went into Reconstruction, 1877 until 1877. And then there were these laws that were initiated and crafted and organized and amended, and so that they can continue to marginalize black people in this country. So you went from pig laws, black codes, Jim Crow, and now we have another set of laws, Jim Crow's cousins. So we need girls like you to step in that space, because you have a charge to keep. With that, I want to say thank you all for being a part.
Thank you.
Let's say thank you and come again.
Thank you.
Thanks.